Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our workshop this evening. We are lucky to have with us elected officials from the town of Cape Elizabeth. I think to start this, we'll just call the meeting to order. We'll do a quick introduction so we all get to know who we are. And then we'll go over from there. We'll turn it over to staff to introduce what it is we're here to talk about this evening. So the council chairman would like to start from Cape Elizabeth. That would be wonderful.
Yes, thank you, Nick, and thank you, members of the council for hosting us here today. So yes, I'm Tim Reiniger, Chair of the Cape Elizabeth Town Council, and I'll turn it over to our town manager.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Matt Sturgis, Town Manager for Town of Cape Elizabeth. Good to see you all.
I'm Penny Jordan on Cape Elizabeth Town Council, and I use Sawyer Road all the time. I just want you to know.
Maureen O'Meara, I'm the town planner for the town of Cape Elizabeth.
Jamie Fitch, Sustainability Manager for the town of Scarborough.
Stephanie Anderson, Town Council.
Jeremy Gabrielson, Town Council in Cape Elizabeth.
Susan Gillis, Town Council, Cape Elizabeth.
I'm April Seither, Town Council Scarborough.
Don Cushing, Scarborough.
Karen Shoup, Scarborough Council.
Nick McGee, Chair, Town of Scarborough. Try to get it out of my.
Tom Hall, Town Manager.
Jean Marie Caterina.
Don Hamel.
John Anderson.
Yeah, and so great amount of gratitude for you taking the trip out here, especially during rush hour. So we know you had to battle through a little bit of traffic, but thank you for coming and having this joint meeting with us. Who wants to introduce what it is we're here to talk about?
That would be me.
All right, Ms. Fitch, thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to share my screen. Maureen and I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see if it cooperates. There we go. So hold on. There we go. Liam, can you adjust where that is? Thank you.
Is it dangerous?
I know, right?
Is that better?
Or do you want out of the way? Just.
Oh, the one, yeah. I would love it for it to say not you're viewing Jamie Fitch's screen, but that's fine. We'll roll with it. So we're here this evening to talk about Sawyer Street and Sawyer Road. So a little bit of confusion because Scarborough also has a Sawyer Road. So for Scarborough residents, we're specifically talking about Sawyer Street, which is a shared road with Cape Elizabeth and off of Spurwink Road, Route 77. And so the map on your screen there kind of provides a little bit of orientation. Maureen and I are just going to tag team this presentation. And so I believe Maureen has the first slide.
So we didn't come to this proposal lightly. How did we get here? There's been a lot of work that's been done up to this point. I'm just going to touch on a few things. Cape Elizabeth did do a sea level rise vulnerability study in 2015, and we really did it because we were revising our normal high water line definition, and this was just one of the outputs that came out of that. But that was the first time where we really made a list of our roads and other facilities that were vulnerable, and I could hold up the chart and you could know which one was Sawyer Road because it's got red all across the whole chart. And then in 2019, we were very fortunate to be approached by Jake Amon from the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve. I've had to practice pronouncing that. And they were really looking at partnering with communities if they were going to be replacing culverts and those culverts were having habitat impacts. So they were able to get us some money, and we studied 16 culverts in Cape Elizabeth, and we started studying the Sawyer Road culvert. It's definitely getting ready for replacement. And shortly after we started that project, we actually got funding to do the Sawyer Road culvert tidal crossing. And that is the key piece of the study work for Sawyer Road in Cape Elizabeth, Sawyer Street and Scarborough. And that was where Cape and Scarborough really are sitting at the table. That study had a lot of serious tidal modeling work done. And We were looking at how to replace the culvert and the cost to replace the culvert and what the environmental impacts would be to replace the culvert. And we kind of came to the point where maybe we shouldn't be replacing this culvert. Maybe we should be looking bigger. And that's where all of you came together. Well, most of you were here for 2022 joint council workshop where Scarborough and Cape Elizabeth said, maybe we should be thinking about taking this road out instead of trying to keep it. And following that, the two communities, we've been working on some grant proposals, and we have been successful in getting a grant from the Maine Natural Resource Conservation Program to completely remove the road. So that's really why we're here today, to talk about are we ready to proceed?
Just a good morning. This photo right here on the slide is actually from just weeks back, right?
January 10th. So, there you go.
Yeah. Let's see, there we go.
Okay, so I just wanted to spend a minute on this is that major study we did in 2019. And if you look on the left, you can see Sawyer Road. And on either side of Sawyer Road, you've got these two big round pond-like structures. And this is when I learned from Jake Gaiman that that's actually a really bad sign. Because what that means is that the culvert is constraining natural tidal flows, and the velocity is increasing as it's pushing its way back and forth through the culvert. And the velocity is actually eroding each side of the culvert. And that's all habitat that's been lost. And so when we're looking at this, you can also see the cracks in the road, so you know where that culvert is. So if you look on the right, what you see is the red is the velocity of tidal flows. That's the highest velocity while you're having all that erosion. And this is the best picture that I've seen that shows that even if you spend $2 to $5.5 million to replace this aging culvert that's constraining tidal flows, you're still going to have the road's still going to flood. It's going to flood a lot. It's going to flood multiple times a year. In order to stop the road from flooding, the modeling showed that you would have to add about 7 vertical feet of fill to raise that road up to last for the next 50 to 100 years. In order to add that fill, you would have to increase the base of the fill, which means you're impacting more of the surface of the marsh. You're having significant environmental permitting challenges with that. And then if you add that much fill, apparently it starts to sink. So you're still not really fixing the problem. So then you say, well, maybe what we should be doing if we want to be really environmentally responsible is to install a causeway, which pulls the road up out of the marsh. And that's where we get to the question of if the town of Scarborough had $10 million to invest in roads, if the town of Cape Elizabeth had $10 million to invest in roads or causeway, is this where you would do it?
Did you want me to answer that?
It's gonna be fine.
Go back.
Oh, yep.
One other item to consider too, and you can see you can see where the culvert is on the red, where it goes through. 3 years ago, the Maine DOT they do a routine inspection of the culverts. That culvert is close to failure at the present time as well. So it's a metal culvert, so the bottom of it is quickly aging out. So we're at the point that this couldn't have had better timing as far as wanting to decide replacement or the alternative this evening. So one way or the other, actions are going to be needed to be taken in the near term. Thank you.
Sure. So we wanted to start out with a little bit of background about why we're here this evening, and then moving forward, we are hoping that the councils will commit to the MNRCP grant that Maureen mentioned. We're going to have to request additional cash match from Scarborough to be added to the process. We'll get into that a little bit. And initiate an MOU or memorandum of understanding to administer the grant jointly with Cape Elizabeth. And just again, this photo, we've got lots of recent flooding photos. This one's actually from 2022, the storm just before Christmas last year, 2 years ago now.
So after that 2022 joint workshop, staff had been working on grant funding, and we had originally been working on funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, NIFWIF. And our initial application was not successful. We resubmitted, reformatted the application, and that was for design work, not construction. And MNRCP heard about the project and said, we want you to apply to us. And we've applied for and have been awarded $1.59 million. And that is a soup to nuts grant where we do environmental assessment work. We then come up with an environmental remediation plan. We install the environmental remediation, and then we pull out the road and we remediate the roadbed. And of course, before we pull out the road, we build the turnarounds. And MNRCP is interested in this because they are looking at 62 plus acres of saltwater wetland enhancement and restoration. So they are very much interested in the environmental aspect of this. And I just need to say that because that means we need to remove all of the road. There isn't really an opportunity to leave some of it behind.
And so Maureen mentioned we didn't come to this decision lightly. We've got lots of recent examples of the road flooding. We are anticipating flooding to happen more frequently and become more extensive. This shows an image of the FEMA floodplain. The green hash marks is the existing floodplain or flood zone, and the light purple is the updated flood zone that will be adopted in 2024. So you can see that the extent of the flooding is frequent, it's increasing in severity. And so this is typically during storm events. We're also seeing washover on Sawyer Street during astronomical high tides. So these are tides that are right around 11 feet or higher. I will say that we've got 11-foot tides predicted this weekend. So February 10th, 11th, and 12th, we are anticipating high tides above 11 feet. And likewise, March 10th, 11th, and 12th, we're anticipating high tides above 11 feet. So we will likely see the situation on Sawyer Road, Sawyer Street, during peak high tide, where the water is washing over the road. And then we have our recent examples. These are two photos from the January 10th storm and the storms on January 10th, and especially the storm on January 13th, which unfortunately we don't have photos from that storm, coincided with astronomical high tides, and especially on the 13th. The peak of the storm surge coincided with peak high tide, and that's why we saw so much coastal flooding during those storms. And you know, to have two storms of that magnitude timed with our astronomical high tides 3 days apart, it gives you a sense of what we may be looking at in the future. And we know that we've got lots of other issues like Maureen mentioned throughout Scarborough. So why are we recommending road removal in addition to the other priorities in town? The traffic counts on this road are fairly low. They're right around 1,000 or 1,200 per day. And there are other ways to get around. So we've got Wells Road to Spurwink Ave in Cape Elizabeth, Spurwink Road to Pleasant Hill Road, Black Point Road in Scarborough. When we had our workshop in 2022 with, it included residents from Sawyer Street in Scarborough, voicing openness to making the Sawyer Street a dead end. And we heard that their largest concern was their intersection with Spurwink Road and being able to safely turn left out of that road because of primarily because of sight distance at that intersection. And the town has undertaken an effort to make improvements on Spurwink Road, and that intersection is scheduled to be improved in 2025. So hopefully improving the sight distance and making it safer for people to turn left out of Sawyer Street. And we've got lots of other road infrastructure priorities in Scarborough. So these, again, all of these photos are from the January 10th storm. We've got significant flooding on Route 1, Route 9, Pine Point Road, flooding on Payne Road, and plus other issues on Black Point Road in the Pine Point area and the Higgins Beach area. And these are all major roads with much higher traffic counts than Sawyer Street. And Maureen and I like to call this the competition for the worst picture. So while our roads look like they're the marsh, because the water is gently flowing across them from the marsh, this is what Cape Elizabeth is dealing with.
So this is, as leaders of the two communities, you're being asked to do something very difficult. You're being asked to make hard choices and set priorities. And, you know, in Cape Elizabeth, we were kidding about that. It seems like in Scarborough that your floodwaters are much more polite and gentle and they just flow over the roads, where in Cape Elizabeth, where we have oceanfront roads, you know, that's Shore Road. And that happened on January 10th. Shore Road has 2,600 cars going over it in 2022. Sawyer Road has less than 1,200. Spurwink Ave Culvert, you can see if you look at that, you know, it's not just that part of the road. You can see open water on both sides of the road. Spurwink has 3,600 cars, whereas again, we're comparing less than 1,200 on Sawyer.
So this is the question, given our infrastructure needs and limited funding, as decision makers, what do we do with Sawyer Street and Sawyer Road? Do we maintain it or do we remove it? And it seems as though there are higher priorities for both communities than maintaining this road. And we also just want to, oh, do you have a question?
When you say the entire road,
We're talking about a 1,400-foot section that crosses the marsh. So it will, obviously, we're not removing access to the residences that are on that
oh,
road.
okay,
So rather than being a through road, it will be dead end on each
on
end.
both sides.
Yep. And did want to touch on kind of the outreach and community engagement that we've done up until this point. So again, in March 2022, there was the joint workshop. Residents of Sawyer Street in Scarborough received letters notifying them of the workshop. Likewise, residents in Cape Elizabeth on Sawyer Road and Wells Road received letters. And then for this workshop, we notified residents of Sawyer Street in Scarborough and also Spurwink Road residents within 1,000 feet of Spurwink Road's intersection with Sawyer Street. So, you know, trying to give people an opportunity to hear what's being proposed and provide some input and feedback to decision makers. And then moving forward as part of the MNRCP grant process, we do have public meetings planned, or there will be public meetings held in both communities this spring and summer.
So the MNRCP grant requires a schedule. It requires a lot of environmental assessment. And I just picked up some highlights here. And the key takeaway from this is that the actual roadbed won't get removed until winter 2026, 2027, because it's tidal area. Work has to be done in the winter. So there's, you know, 2 years worth of pre-work before that actual removal happens.
And then we also wanted to touch on the cash match that is needed to move forward with this project. So Maureen mentioned that we had applied for the NIFWIF grant in the end of fiscal year 23, so June of 2023. And as part of that process, Scarborough Town Council authorized a $35,000 CIP to serve as cash match for that project. The MNRCP opportunity became available to us, or we became aware of it after our budget process. And so to move forward with that, the MNRCP project will need a total of $185,000 cash match to fund the construction of the turnarounds at the end of Sawyer Street in Scarborough. So the grant funds that were awarded have to be used for primarily restoration purposes, and constructing a turnaround doesn't qualify as restoration. So we are looking for an additional $150,000. And if the council decides to move forward, you'll see it in the fiscal year 25 CIP request for this project.
And, you know, municipalities have different processes. So in Cape Elizabeth, we're not allowed to submit a grant application without getting council authorization. So the council authorized the original application with up to a $250,000 match. The actual submission was much less than that. So we are now saying we are going to need 185,000. And it's proposed that 75,000 would be put in the budget in FY 2025, 26, and 27.
So these are the next steps. If the municipalities decide to move forward with the MNRCP grant, is to authorize acceptance of the $1.59 million. Sign a memorandum of understanding outlining the roles of Scarborough and Cape Elizabeth, and approve the requested cash match to supplement the project. And we are happy to talk and answer questions.
My question has to do with all of the people who use that for, you know, the bird watching, and because there's always people there every day, every night. And so if we're taking away a chunk of the road, where will that end, and where might they be able to still do their hobby?
Do you want me to take that
Sure.
first? All right, so the intent is to not leave any more road than we absolutely have to. So we would go just past the last driveway and
On Cape
create
side or on Scarborough?
on both sides. We would go just past the last private driveway, and that's where a turnaround would be designed and constructed.
Okay,
And so it's, I think on the Scarborough side, it's a lot closer to the marsh, actually. On the Cape Elizabeth side, it's a little further up. I have heard
Map.
some people ask whether there might be an opportunity to put in maybe a canoe launch on the Cape side. And that's a feature I think we could work through as part of that public process.
mhm,
But for people who are going to the marsh to look at birds, that's one of the reasons MNRCP is willing to give us this money, because this is an incredibly important bird habitat. And unless there's an investment in Sawyer Street and Road,
mhm.
we're all gonna wake up someday and chunks of the road are gonna be all over the marsh. And I don't think that would be very good for bird
Mhm.
habitat either.
Mhm. The other thing, and Jeremy, you can help me with this, I'm sure. Because the other thing is that I had read about that we're trying to rescue marshes because of the carbon sequestering that they offer us. So how does that play into the strategy?
So with anticipated sea level rise, a lot of our salt marshes are going to be converted to tidal flats. They're going to be underwater or mud flats, I should say. They're going to be underwater for longer periods of time. And so we need to be looking at the areas around our marsh so that to allow them to expand inland. And so removing the tidal restriction there will improve the flow of water inland and allow the marsh to migrate further inland. So more of our uplands are going to be converted into salt marshes. That's going to happen whether we remove the road or not. It just helps that process. And fortunately, a lot of the areas around this marsh are already in conservation, so there is room for the marsh
Okay,
to
then
move
I have
inland.
another question. Maureen probably knows where this is going. So if you go up Wells Road and you
Mhm.
follow the Spring River, there
Yes.
are fields that, are they going to, will it spread that far up into the field?
I think in Cape Elizabeth, because we have those big 250-foot wetland buffers,
Mm-hmm,
that there is a lot of room for these wetlands to expand
mm-hmm,
before they start nibbling at some very important family farms.
okay, okay.
Yeah, for Scarborough purposes, as I recall, the kind of the headwaters, if you head to the left here, towards Scarborough, that's Rachel Carson federally protected.
Yeah,
And then the town, actually, the land trust has Warren Woods that abuts that. And the town owns Wiley Field and all the associated land. So there's a fair amount of already protected area up in those headwaters.
right.
And Penny, if I could, so I'm one of those people who both uses this road a couple times a week on my bike and is often pulled off on that shoulder with my binoculars. It won't be available for that recreational use, for just sort of easy driving through, but as a, as a birder, I'm looking forward to coming up to those turnouts on either end and setting my scope up and watching from there. There's also a number of other places. This provides really easy driving access for folks who like to get out and look at those ponds. It'll be a little bit more difficult access for that use, but I think there will be other opportunities that become available, and having that dead end road will make my wife happier. Get out of the car door onto a busy or somewhat busy road.
I have a question. Thank you for the presentation. It's very, it's heartwarming, actually. I find it heartwarming. Mike, I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that we're not going to start removing the road for 2 years. And I would, one of the reasons why we have to remove or should remove the road is because of the washover and the deterioration of the road. And I think that there's going to be probably quite a bit of that happening over the next 2 years.
So, and if it was up to me, I'd take the road out right away, but we have some very high-powered environmental partners. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Rachel Carson, and they have educated us that we can't just take that road out because the tidal constriction has altered the surface of the marsh. And we could be short-term creating a bit of an environmental mess. So what they really want us to do is take some time and do environmental assessment, to go out there and measure the height of the marsh and the water flow. And Jake could explain this better than I can. And then we have to come up with a plan for remediation of the marsh. And so it'll take a year after we put the remediation in. They want things to grow, to start to recover. Then we take the road out. So it's an environmentally sensitive way to try to restore the tidal flows. I mean, when you drive across the marsh and you see those ponds, the reason those ponds are there is because the tidal constriction has made water sit on the marsh longer than it otherwise would have. And it's killed the vegetation and sunk in the floor of the marsh. So we have a lot of scientists who are involved and want to start doing some remediation of that. And we have to plan that into our schedule.
Councilor Jim, I would say that if we are committed to this, and with that, knowing that delay, several year delay, we know the road is going to flood. History certainly suggests that. We can predict that fairly accurately, frankly. I know Matt and I are deploying resources, typically in an emergency situation, to temporarily close the road. One of the options is to take some temporary measures to close that road sooner. But that's all part of the conversation there.
And
In any event, I would, if that's the direction we go, I don't expect we would be investing anything other than, safety and security in the event of, situation.
And if I could, on that point too, so it's part of my day job. I work for a land trust that does a lot of work with land protection and tidal restoration projects. I haven't been involved with this project, but this is a restoration project that the folks who are involved with this are following all of the best practices. And this is a restoration project that is significant at a national scale, not just in the state of Maine. It's for folks who are involved in tidal marsh restoration, this is a very exciting project. I also personally like it because it makes a lot of sense financially for the town. To not have to invest $10 million here for a road that's still potentially going to have problems. And it lets us look at deploying some of those resources so that I can get to the dump without having to drive all the way around 77 with the tides high.
That's the real key.
Any other questions, comments regarding Councilor Kennedy?
Yeah, I was part of that meeting back in
2022, I guess it was, and I was pretty excited about it when I first heard about it, having grown up in the area. I've seen the changes, over time and, am aware of, the flooding that does occur over there. And I know I didn't hear from constituents back then who live or might be impacted by that they were against it. I haven't gotten anything, but of course now we're back at it again and putting it out there. I just want to make sure they're thoroughly aware of it and, we listen to what their concerns are, if any. I know if I lived down there, I'd be thrilled that that road was going to be cut off and I wouldn't have anyone driving in front of my house all the time because I use that road a lot myself when I'm shortcutting to here, there, or elsewhere. But I just think it's a great idea and I would thoroughly support this, so.
Council Hammond.
Yeah, I'd like to build on this. I mean, this could be one of the few examples I'm aware of where actually the plans were ahead of the crisis, you started, long before we got into the work with you. So, really hats off to you for doing that. But, and the other thing that's striking to me is the fact that, you've got dual challenges of preservation, but also protection. You're trying to mitigate effects of the tidal rise, but at the same time, you're trying to protect a very valuable area. But my question is, is there a point of no return? Is there, if you project, if you extrapolate, is that, what's the time frame look like? Because it does seem like everything's happening faster than anyone anticipated.
To clarify, point of no return for the road or for the marsh?
Yeah, both. I mean, when you talk about what had been happening initially in terms of the flow of the tide and the marsh was being impeded by the culvert. I mean, that's the same story on Route 1, really. And 7 feet, I mean, that's pretty high to raise anything. I mean, it's more than a Bailey Bridge or, a pontoon or who knows what. I mean, I was thinking of that today driving down the Pine Point Road, how high would you have to get to stay ahead of that? So that's my only question. I'm sure there's no answer for it, but that struck me as I was looking at this in the presentation.
Really, practically speaking, we know the culvert is in dire need, and that within years would be kind of the outside. And that doesn't address the underlying issue. Even that is in the millions, I suspect, just the culvert replacement. So I think it's dire and needs to be addressed. And I think what's intriguing to me about this is, though we're having different conversations about Route 1 and Pine Point Road, which is investing and finding long-term solutions to make those roads viable. This is about divesting, and it's it's addressing the same issue, but in a totally different way.
Councilor Jordan.
I know, just
Okay.
sit there quiet. No. No, it's like a no-brainer from my perspective. We've got to do something. And so I know that I have to say goodbye to the road eventually. But we have to do it because Mother Nature is telling us that we better do something and we got to take care of the problem. And I think what I picture when it's all done is really a nice sanctuary. So I think it's something we got to pursue.
Councilor Seiler.
So I did have questions about whether or not we anticipate any significant mitigation costs to the culvert between now and road removal. But it sounds like in the event that something catastrophic happens or a significant investment would need to be made, then we could maybe temporarily, find other ways to close off the road or do those kinds of things. So that was one of my questions. And then my other point that I want to make is just, I know that all of us as elected officials want to do right by the residents, and communication is a huge part of that. And so I think that we have some educating to do, especially just outreach to the residents who live obviously on these streets, probably because they get public notices, are aware. But that doesn't define the total impact to our residents who are used to traveling that road or using that road for recreation or whatever it may be. And so I just want to make sure that as a council and we can take this up at communications maybe, that we just have a strategy for engaging our residents and making sure that they understand the why behind why this is maybe the decision that's gonna be the outcome and what the actual impacts are gonna be. And to Jean Marie's point, I think it's a little unsettling for residents to watch us have a workshop and have open discussion about something and kind of have it seem to be going in a certain direction without having taken public comment. So I just want to make sure that we hear from our residents too.
Counselor Anderson.
Yeah, no, I think this is great and I definitely support it. I know we're talking a lot about the road, but for me, I think this is really about an investment in our marsh and in our environment. And I think as we talk to residents, especially in Scarborough, the marsh is really integral to who we are as a community, and we need to do more to protect it. And if that means closing this road, even if it wasn't getting flooded, the fact that it's a barrier to marsh migration, I think, even if this wasn't a flooding issue, I still think it would be something that we would propose, hopefully jointly as two communities who really care about preserving the marsh. So I think as we talk to the public and as we engage and educate, I would like us to see this more be about marsh restoration in that area as opposed to we're taking something away from them with the road, because I think that's just, well, it's an inconvenience, as you guys showed. There's clearly other ways around. But for me, this is about a good decision about preserving the environment and allowing for that marsh migration long term. And it's one little thing we can do for a much bigger challenge. I think we, especially in Scarborough, have to address in a much more bigger way given the marsh in our area.
Counselor Cushing.
What point in this process do you think about closing that road? And it relates a little bit to what Councilor Anderson was saying and Councilor Seither, is that we do need community awareness and involvement, and not everybody pays attention all the time, but when the road gets closed, they suddenly recognize that something is happening there. So have you given any thought to at what point we're just going to say, yeah, we're going to kind of stop fixing it, but we're going to anticipate and just block it off?
So I'll say officially, based on the grant timeline, as Maureen mentioned, we are anticipating winter 2026 to 2027. However, as was mentioned, if something catastrophic happens, if we get another storm and the road goes, at that point, it probably makes sense to do a temporary permanent closure, essentially close off the road rather than investing more resources to repair the road in anticipation of full removal as part of this project.
And so that probably should be something that the residents should be aware of. Sounds to me like you've got access to that road until Mother Earth decides that you don't.
Or December 2026, whichever comes first.
I live down there, I probably want to know that.
Correct, yeah, and I do want to give kudos to Allison, who our communications person who reached out recently to say, hey, let's start talking about doing some articles and getting information out about this this project. From Maureen's and my perspective, we wanted to hear from all of you before we put out there that this is what was happening. So it is in the plan to do some public outreach, write some articles and start getting information out to the public.
Counselor Gabrielson.
And if I could just build on Counselor Anderson's point, I think it would behoove us as we move forward with this process to think about how we can this is going to be a visible project. People are going to see us making this choice and doing this. And I think it would be helpful for us to think about how we can use this project to talk about some of the other choices we're going to be making with regard to sea level rise. We both have other road crossings that are at risk, and we're probably not going to make a choice that looks like this at those other road crossings. And they're much more complicated. There's embedded infrastructure, there's upstream housing and septic systems that get impacted on some of those other crossings. And so really taking the opportunity to talk about why this is the right choice here and why other choices might be better choices at those other crossings, I think is going to be very important forward.
Great. Council Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. March 2024, which is next month. It says contract issued. What does that mean? Does that mean it needs to be signed in March?
No, so one of the good things is the town of Cape Elizabeth actually received an MNRCP grant a few years ago for a tidal culvert replacement. So we're very familiar with their process, and the expectation is that they're gonna be sending us a draft contract next month. And then there's this really fun process of creating a work plan, which will take a few months. But if you know, this is really, you know, a partnership between two communities. And the town of Cape Elizabeth is the name on the grant because they only allow one person to be the name on the grant. But we have to be doing this together. So it felt like we needed time for both communities to come together and say, yeah, we think we're all on board. We're all on the same road here. So does that answer your question?
It does, but I don't think I asked the question I should have. When do we need to make it clear? When do we need to make our decision? I mean, we need a process where the public can comment. And so that needs to happen. It looks like really soon and quite quickly.
Well, and the two towns have two different processes. So Cape Elizabeth, you have voted to accept the grant. Scarborough has a different process. And you still need to put in the money for the cash match, but you authorized it. So the assumption is that we'll be successful in the end. It's just, you know, at some point, they're gonna want the contract signed, and I would hate I always worry about not letting money go to waste. You know, when they need that contract signed, we want to be ready to sign it. And that's why we have to have these conversations now. I can't give you a hard number on when the contract needs to be signed, but we're going to be working on that work plan, and we shouldn't be working on a work plan if for some reason we don't want to accept the money.
Yeah, for our purposes, I'll be looking for this council to grant authorization to accept the grant as well, just to formalize that piece. And then, as was suggested, I think a memo of understanding in terms of understanding mutual or individual roles and responsibilities in administering the grant is a key component as well. We can pair those two up, so they're kind of taken up at the same time or separate them slightly. But I think the sooner we all get on the same page and have a common understanding, the better.
I guess for me, the question is if this is contingent on budget authorization happening this year, does the contract give us the wiggle room that says, you know, official contract is official once funding has been authorized, or like what is like the official?
I think you'll be fine.
Okay.
They don't.
We're committing to funding that isn't needed right away. In fact, if I understand Cape's approach, they're going to spread it over 3 fiscal years. We could do that too. But, you know, our suggestion was we come to you with one authorization, but we could spread that out to ease the pain if that's easier, or even delay. But understand, we are committing to that local match. When you choose to fund it is up for discussion.
What's the process for authorization from us? What's that gonna look like?
Authorization?
Authorize the grant.
Not sure what you mean.
What is the
Acceptance.
process gonna be?
Two public
to-
hearings and.
Yeah, we,
first read, second read.
readings, yeah.
Typically not. I mean, to accept the grant would be technically a once and done, a vote of council. But if you wish to layer additional process, that's certainly your prerogative as well.
Yes, Councilor Shupe.
Sure. So, I mean, I think this is a step in the right direction. I'm excited about this. This is the kind of stuff that I want to be seeing for the marsh. One of the questions that they did have that I think might be helpful for residents, because I've heard it a couple times, is people still, we're cutting off the road, but is there going to be parking for people? I think it might be helpful for the residents to know, oh, we're going to put in a parking lot, or there's going to be no access, no parking. I mean, and I have no idea, but I don't know if that's been discussed. Or if the neighbors are suddenly gonna look out their door and they're gonna have 20 cars because someone spotted a bird. That would be maybe one of my concerns, though, is are we addressing that yet? Because that is an unknown, I think, for maybe a couple of the residents or the folks who like to go down there and use and look that area and resource.
I don't think we've defined those details yet. You know, it was suggested possibly there could be some sort of boat launch, might be too improper characterization, but a canoe, you know, an area to gain access to the water. At the very least, we'll need a place to turn our plows around, so there needs to be some kind of there are practical considerations. Beyond that, you both have the ability to regulate what happens on your roadway. You could have no parking if you wished, or I think there's probably an opportunity for some further public input in those particular designs.
So you have a 50-foot wide right of way. And I think trying to do things beyond the 50-foot wide right of way within 100 feet of the marsh is going to be very, very, very challenging. So, but this is a great opportunity for those public meetings and stakeholder groups to get input, and people can talk about what they're interested in. We've just talked about maybe Scarborough's not that interested in any kind of boat launch because you have an option very close by. I'm hearing a few people in Cape saying, well, maybe we would like that. But I don't know if anybody has enough room for a big parking lot once you get out of the setback and if you're trying to stay in your 50-foot wide right of way.
Just gonna create parking. Can I just need to ask you a question. I just, this timeline, because I'm like a closure person. So we got this timeline. It's something we have to do. We can't put it off. So are we looking for, do we agree that this timeline is where we're headed? Is that what you guys are going for? Is that the direction you have? Because there's not a do nothing option. You got to do something because the road is definitely going to wash away.
I think that's what we wanted to hear, that do nothing isn't an option.
That's the way I look at it. Do nothing isn't an option, but we got to do it in a timeline that makes sense. Because the road, having driven it thousands of times, is going to go away soon.
So
I think 2026, 2027 is,
so building on that question though, is that timeline really based on that part of that restoration effort? Is
so-
probably the fastest this could happen?
Yeah, so the major abutter is the US Fish and Wildlife Service.
Mhm.
And, they have been phenomenal to work with. But some of the remediation that, actually, almost all the remediation that has to happen outside of the roadbed is on their land. And they're saying, look, this is what we need. We need a certain amount of data collection. We need time to analyze that data, figure out what we want to do, and then they want to put those remediation measures in place. And it may be runnels, it may be some regrading of the marsh surface. It's way beyond, my skill set to explain that. But they want to be able to do that work and let it sit for a year to see if it's recovering and it's ready to go. So if we want to talk about making sure stakeholders and abutters are happy, they're kind of like they're the elephant in the room on this.
And that, all of that remediation is essentially preparing the upper marsh for more water. And making sure that the endangered species habitat, because there are endangered salt marsh sparrow that live in the Spurwink Marsh, are ready for an additional influx of tidal water.
Just from a timeline point of view, I know we're not talking about investment, but if you were to consider that, there's an extensive design timeframe associated. I can only imagine there'll be a very extensive regulatory process, permits, even if we could secure those. It's not a dissimilar timeline, and then there's a matter of securing millions and millions in financing to do whatever we decide to do. So that is years out, even if that's the choice we take.
And Tom, to that point as well, there's extended monitoring that will take place after the project is completed as well. So to see, the impacts on the habitat and along those lines. So we've worked with Jake Ammon on that as well, and looking towards future evaluation and monitoring of the marsh and how the impacts are and where that is. Because as Councilor Gabrielson said, this is of national scope. People are extremely excited about this. The fact that there were multiple projects that were competing against this, and they put all their eggs in this one basket it's a huge tip of the cap to both communities, but also shows the significance of this environmentally to where it is as a project. So I think this would be a great moment to see how a project like this can be successful, as we all communities across the eastern seaboard and other areas have to deal with sea level changes, sea level rise.
Councilor Cushing.
We're going to be asked, I understand the timeline and also the need for public input. Are we going to be required to vote on stuff before we have significant public input in order to satisfy the timeline?
I think that's true.
Hmm.
I think we have time for public input.
Okay, well, that's my question.
Absolutely.
But-
And if we can get our counselors to stop asking questions, I'd like to invite the public to give us some input.
I consider
Not
myself
directed at you,
silent.
Counselor Cushing. No, if we do have a little time tonight, there are people here that I'm sure would love to, and we would also love to hear some of that input. So it could be the first step.
There's 6 online, and certainly we have as many or more assembly as well.
Wonderful. I did not want to shut questions from the council. So please continue. Any other counselors that want to speak? Any other questions? No, we do have time remaining, so I think it would be great if we could have the public who've attended, taken the time. I'd like to invite the Cape Elizabeth residents that want to speak first, knowing that if there's spillover, the Scarborough residents can hang on to our regular monthly meeting and we can take that public comment at that time if it does spill over. So just some house rules for those that are new to Scarborough or visiting here. We allow 3 minutes for public comment. We ask that you be respectful. Questions get directed through the chair. And we ask that you refrain from any type of personal attacks. We're here to make decisions based on our community and the best interest for everyone that's here. And so there's no ill will, and we hope that everyone can act respectfully. So with that, 3 minutes. If you're from Cape Elizabeth, please feel free to approach that podium. There's a little red light that will start blinking when you're out of time. And we just ask that you try to hold yourself to that. Thanks.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jean Montesano. I live at 1257 Sawyer Road, Cape Elizabeth. And I taught in Scarborough for years, so I have traveled that road many years. I've been in my house for 50 years. So through the years, watching the tides, and it was always the astronomical, which was maybe once every 5 years, 10 years. It's every astronomical now. It's just every astronomical. Scarborough has quite a history with marshes too. What you're calling, you call them the tidal restrictions. When they redid Route 1 here in Scarborough, they called them onions. And that led to what we're seeing now in Cape Elizabeth. That led to Route 1 being raised. What I'm seeing with the culvert right now is there's an indentation starting. And Scarborough also has a history of a lost life due to a culvert on Old Blue Point Road that got washed out. That's my concern right now. When I saw out my window a car bobbing, you know, to lose someone's life. I want to remind everybody that the salt marshes are the nurseries of our sea life and our other, you know, natural habitats for many other creatures. So the last snowstorm, I had deer tracks, raccoon tracks. I have 24 turkeys. You know, so we see many of that. There's plenty of things that we look at out there, and we're very happy to do so. I don't know if you know, but the Gulf of Maine research is also looking at that particular piece of property too. They're looking at the tidal impact on that road. I think Penny Jordan raised the same question I had, is what's going to happen, and I think Mr. Gabrielson did too, about the access to that marsh. I know that I think it's considered the old Pine Point Road, and then it might be King's Landing. There's tar, which as a teacher here, we use those all the time. You didn't, you know, you knew when the tide was high, you knew when to access them, you know, and so we studied them, but you had foot traffic that was not impacting. And I think as a cyclist like you, I've already planned my routes around. So, and I'm going to the dump in my ways now too. So I'm in favor. I think it before anything dramatic happens, and you know, I think as engineers study it and looking at the compact of the road now as it's starting over the culvert, I think that's more of a concern, and I'm hoping that we can all come to an agreement with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello. I'm Nancy Olson. I live at 98 Wells Road. I'm on the Sawyer Road end, just a couple houses in. I could see my yard on those, those pictures. My husband and I have seen the tidal change firsthand in our yard. The astronomical high tides used to be 30 feet off of our property. They're now 30 feet onto our property. So it's considerable. And we live in a very low-lying property compared to our neighbors. My biggest concern is for Wells Road because of the additional traffic that's going to be on that road. And on my end of the road, the west end, the road isn't as good on that end. It's older, whereas the other end of it was redone at a time when the other houses were being built. It's a very narrow. There's no safety for people who walk on the road or bicyclists. If you if you came along that road with your bicycle, dog walkers. I've had to jump into the weeds from time to time because a car has been coming along and almost hit me. So I'm concerned about that and the speeding issues, of course. And I also think there are some stakeholders like the Trifecta that usually goes across the marsh that where are they going to go? Are they going to have to reroute their races? The other thing that I'm concerned or not concerned about, but I'll just mention, I am an avid birder. I have been for decades. I'm a volunteer with the Avian Haven, which is a rescue and rehab facility in Freedom, Maine. We all know there's abundant bird life on that end of the marsh. It's great to see all the birders out. I am one of them. On the curvature at the end of the roads, I would ask for consideration for maybe there's an opportunity for education about the marsh and to have signage. You know how we can go to some places and they'll have boards. Well, they can talk about the wildlife refuge. It can talk about the birds, what birds they might see, what wildlife they might see, and even fish and river otters, which they might see in the rivers. So I just wanted to bring that up. And thank you, everybody, for all of your work. I really appreciate it. My husband and I are 100% behind this, and we would actually love to see the road closed sooner rather than later.
Thank you. I'm gonna go online. Is there anyone from Cape Elizabeth online that wishes to speak? If you could just use the raise my hand function. Back in house. Anyone else from Cape Elizabeth that wanted to speak on this? I'll turn it over to the Scarborough residents. Let's start Scarborough online. If there's anyone online that wants to speak. Good. All right, back in house. Scarborough residents that want to speak in house.
My name is Paula Eisenhart, and I live at 26 Sawyer Street in Scarborough. My house is the one that is the closest down into the marsh at the end of the road. I have horses. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you haven't. I've lived there 32 years. And all that you're saying about the marsh is true. I've watched the insult to the marsh from increased traffic. When I first moved there, the developments in Cape Elizabeth and the developments on the Scarborough side weren't there. And there were only a few cars that would go through that marsh. Now it's a shortcut for big trucks. Just, you know, I watch them go by with, we're talking construction trucks carrying giant machinery. And to see that go through the marsh is just painful. It's loud and, you know, that affects me too, but it's really the life of the marsh that is totally compromised by that road. And it's painful to live there and watch that because I obviously moved there because I love the marsh. And I'm 100% behind this, and I think you will be an example for the whole state, maybe the nation, for a wonderful response to global warming and to environmental protection and restoration. And I thank you for catching up with all the thoughts that I've had for the last 32 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eisenhart. Seeing no other public oh, there we go. Just in time.
Hi, I'm Nat Thompson. I live at 221 Spurwink Road, across from the boat launch. Selfishly, I'm unhappy that the road's gonna close because of my access to Portland. It's just a straight shot. And it's not a huge thing to go around, obviously. But I think this is the right choice. I just ask that you consider what those dead ends look like. And the boat launch that potentially goes in on the other side, because I can promise you that the boat launch across from my house is not used just for launching boats. So, and also the speed, there'll be a number more cars going by there, obviously by my house and across that bridge. The kids jumping off, swimming in the summertime. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done when the construction of the new road is completed or incorporated, but somehow slowing traffic because people are not going 35 across the area there. So anyway, those are mine. And I understand, and I think that this is the obvious choice to make, and it's the right thing for the marsh, right thing for the environment. But selfishly, I'm gonna miss the access to Portland. Anyway.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public like to speak this evening? Okay, with that, I'll close public comment and just ask any of the counselors have any final thoughts or I think from just reading the room on this side of the table, I think you can count on us to start advancing this through the paces. And we'll get the ball rolling. I mean, and we, also take a chance to speak for everyone. We really appreciate you coming tonight. We're very grateful. This is a great meeting. Excellent work, both Maureen and for Jamie. Wonderful job. I know that was a lot. So, Mr. Sturgis, Mr. Hall, we'll trust you to continue to put this through its paces for each respective town. Thank you. With that, we'll close the workshop this evening. We start our regular council meeting in about a half hour. Feel free to mingle, have a cup of coffee. Thank you.
Don't start yet.
No, they're not.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Scarborough, February 7th, 2024, Town Council meeting. If you could all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Like allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And to the republic for which it stands,
One nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. Kate, could you call the roll, please?
Counselor Scyther, here. Counselor Cushing,
Here.
Counselor Shoup. Here. Counselor Katarina.
Here.
Counselor Hamel.
Here.
Counselor Anderson.
Here.
Chairman McGee.
Here. Next item of business tonight is general public comments. If there's something that you're here to speak about that's not on our agenda, please approach the podium. Friendly reminder, you have 3 minutes. Be respectful at all times and deliver any questions through the chair. Thank you.
Hello, Nina McKee, 309 Black Point Road, number 59. And I just quickly want to say thank you to Counselor Anderson for the wonderful council corner that was just occurred. And I think it did a lot of good for the schools and for the people of the town. And I hope there are many, many more of those. And I hope that there's a lot more publicity before them. But thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Can I respond to that?
During public comment,
Well, just quickly.
make it short and sweet.
I just want to say thank you to the school board and the communications committee as well. While I appreciate the thank you, it was really a team effort and just want to make sure everybody gets recognized for the work that they did to support it.
Thank you. Mr. Pritchard.
Jim Pritchard, Maple Avenue. January 30th, a group of us from the Maple Ave group met with the traffic safety team. One of the comments was made by the director that Director of Public Works, is that he received a quote for building speed tables at $12,000. I took a couple days and I thought about it and I did my own numbers. I came up with $3,900. The only thing it didn't include is setup and tear down. After looking at the two numbers, I couldn't figure out what I had done wrong to be so far off from what the director got. I sent 2 emails out to 2 local paving companies. One of them, I got both replies last night. One of them came back with a number of $6,750 per speed table, including setup, tear down, and a flagman. The second one I got was $4,000 for the speed table and $700 for setup and tear down. I don't know why there's such a discrepancy. I have my suspicion with the history of this. I think the intent was to use that number and use it against having speed tables put down. I don't understand why it wasn't questioned by the director or the town engineer. They should have known that that number was outlandish. There's a trust. They might have convinced some people that it was open, fair process. I haven't been convinced yet. We have the same group that denied traffic calming under the ghost policy, creating a new one. They blocked us out from any participation in drawing it up. And I'm going to get pushback because somebody will say, well, we've had meetings. We wanted to be right on the ground level. I know one person with me, and I was told can't have public involved because it would complicate things. I would think with your survey of only 30%, think you're including the public, you'd want to do something to improve that perception. But the public means nothing. I hope this will be corrected and that $12,000 number isn't used against the policy to deny. There are other issues. I'm out of time. I'll follow up in writing with the other issues because there are some major issues between draft 1 and draft 2 that they had that night we met, and they never brought it up. Never. And that's supposed to be fair and honest with us, taxpayers. Got a long way to go to convince me. The council has got to take a look at themselves and their employee and get on the same page because you're confusing the hell out of all of us. Got council saying they want involvement. We got the management team saying, no, you can't be involved and make things too complicated. I think you all better sit down, have a conversation, get on one page, then let us know what you're doing. Because nobody knows what's doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. Liam, do we have anyone online? Okay. Nobody else in the audience. I'm going to close public comment. Mr. Pritchard, just as a response, I do want you to know that we do care and we do listen. And I don't want you to think otherwise, but your comments are taken. Thank you. Next item tonight is minutes, January 17th, 2024, Town Council meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion, second discussion? All in favor? Show that is unanimous. Thank you. Adjustments to the agenda. I don't have any. Does any other counselor have? Okay. Item 7 is treasurer's warrants. I did sign those before the meeting this evening. Item 8, town manager's report. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a number of items I'd like to update. First, let me show appreciation for Liam Gallagher for standing in my place at last meeting. I think this is the longest time I've ever been with between council meetings, having missed one, and then we had a strange 5th Wednesday this last month. So it's nice to be back here with you. With respect to storm damage, just a quick update. Obviously, we did have 3 significant storms. 2 of them caused severe coastal flooding. I think Liam provided a pretty thorough update at your last meeting regarding our response there. We still await federal disaster declaration. That could be weeks, it could be months, probably more likely it'll be months before we hear in that regard. In the meantime, we are better understanding the damage and getting firmer cost estimates for that repair, and certainly doing things that need to be done for public safety reasons. But those items that we can defer and delay, we are waiting for that declaration to come in. We have met several times with staff from both MEMA, that's the main equivalent of FEMA, and FEMA representatives to inspect and tour all of our public infrastructure. And I am aware that they are also making contact with different private interests that have submitted claims and expressed concern. So just from my perspective, I am extremely pleased with the attention and the responsiveness we've received so far. And hopefully that continues. I will mention a bit of a lingering challenge for us, though in the immediate aftermath of those events, we did undertake clearing of storm damage within the public right of way. Some of that was private materials, fences and wood and who knows what that floated and landed in the road. So we did remove anything that was within the right of way. There still exists certain debris that exists outside of the right of way. And we are getting requests from the public to assist them in removing those items and disposing of them. At this point, we've resisted that. We don't see that as our direct responsibility. But I just mentioned that's an issue that's likely to persist. And in that vein, I'm mindful of the case law that's very clear in the state that really there needs to be a demonstrated public purpose for the expenditure of any public funds. And so that's the standard that we're mindful of in this regard. Having said that, in a kind of a disaster and emergency situation, I think some of those things might be potentially a little more liberal. but here we are weeks past the event. And so I just mentioned that you may start to hear from folks. This is particularly at Higgins Beach. There's a number of sets of stairs that have found their way in people's front lawns that aren't theirs. So we'll continue to work with those folks. We do expect that we'll be doing kind of general beach cleaning of debris that is deposited on the beach. I think there's a demonstrated public purpose. After all, we do weekly beach raking kind of on the beach areas. So I think we're quite comfortable in that regard. But at this point, we've really drawn the line on removing things from people's property, if you will, that it really doesn't have any public purpose associated with it. The FEMA flood maps, as has been mentioned, have been issued. We'll be working through the ordinance committee. There are required to be a number of changes to our floodplain management ordinance, and that must be done by June. So that's something that we'll work through the system, and it will end up in front of this body certainly over the course of the spring. We also have not finalized plans, but we want to do some outreach to our residents and just make them aware that these new maps exist and help them understand what that might mean for them. With respect to the school building project, many members of this council are well aware, as you've been involved with this. There is a new committee that, can I say, is being formed or has been formed. I think there's something in the order of 40 individuals that have, 60 now, that have expressed interest. And as I understand, there's no kind of formal acceptance or selection process. And so anyone who expresses interest will be part of that committee. And to that end, there's a meeting set up for next week, I believe, a Monday, kind of a inaugural meeting, really intended to be take care of some of the housekeeping, help them get organized. In the meantime, a small group of us have been working on a series of survey questions, and the intent of that, just recognizing we're using the same consultant that we use for a community survey. We're still probably 6 to 8 weeks out from having results, and so the thought was to get that process initiated and have results for the committee to work with sooner than later. And lastly, there was a well-attended Council Corner Live event on January 25th that many of you were part of, and I've heard very good feedback from everyone involved. So hopefully that's a good omen for this process going forward. Eastern Trail, we have made some movements. We're doing final recording of the final, not the final, but two of the easements required. CSX, the rail line is in direct conversations with us. This is regarding an aerial easement. There will be a bridge structure that goes over their active rail line. Most notably, we've had very positive meetings with both DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. And so at this point, we're anticipating being in a position to bid this project out in the May-June timeframe of this year. So very pleased with the progress that we've been able to make. With respect to the dredge, they are within 2 weeks of being finally complete. The process does require them to dredge the navigational channel to a certain depth, width and depth. And so part of what they're doing now is going back and resurveying the areas that they have already dredged. Undoubtedly, with these winter storms, there's been some additional material that's found its way back in the channel. So they'll be cleaning up those final pieces. And then if I could also mention, we do have confirmation that the cranes are set to arrive at the location tomorrow, and they'll be installed within the 2 weeks following that. So pleased that we're finally making some progress. With respect to Avenue 2, Councilor Hamel and I are the ones that are most perhaps engaged in the matter. Councilor Hamel, before he was a councilor, was very heavily involved in that matter. And here we are 5 years later, 5.5 years later, and the permit has actually been received by our office. We have a copy of that in the planning office that's available for public inspection. I also have a link for a digital copy of that if anyone's interested. So I think all of us will be trying to make sense of the application, probably convening a stakeholder group to digest what the application is and formulate a kind of next steps. I suspect at our next meeting, we'll be able to report more definitively in that regard. With respect to the traffic calming policy that was addressed from the podium, we are moving our way through. At this point, we have essentially a final draft. There was a meeting attended by, I believe, 4 of my senior staff, along with, I think, 3 counselors were at that meeting on the January 30th. And then more recently, this week, February 6th, there was a follow-up meeting. I know a representative from Maple Avenue was at that meeting. The report was that it was productive. And at this point, the final policy will go to the Transportation Committee at their next meeting. That's scheduled for February 27th. And time will tell in terms of how much input they have and how many changes they may request, but our intent is to bring it to you for consideration and acceptance as soon as we possibly can. So it could be as soon as March 6th, but in no event later than March 20th, I would expect. Just a kind of a suggestion for the future. We do anticipate some budget implications, financial implications. So we're working on refining some of those estimates and understanding what sort of financial resources we may need to respond in the next fiscal year. And we've also made arrangements with existing resources to purchase temporary speed bumps. That's part of the policy to, if that's an option that is worth exploring, they would be deployed on a temporary basis and some study done through those means. So we've made immediate arrangements to have those ordered and available to us this spring. I want to report to the full council on the tax stabilization reimbursement program. This is the somewhat ill-fated, short-lived state program. It would only lasted for a year. This is the so-called tax freeze for qualifying taxpayers. In our case, we had, I believe, just over 1,800 residents qualify. And in total, it was about $412,000 in reimbursements. And as you may recall, the state is to entirely cover that reimbursement. To date, we've only received 56% of that reimbursement request. And I've been in touch with our legislative delegation. Apparently, there is monies requested in the supplemental budget to help satisfy that fully. So we will watch that carefully. But in our case, at this point, we're $181,000 under budget, under what we expected. In my conversations with the delegation, it seemed quite clear, at least our local delegation is quite supportive of that and thought the prospect of it getting fully funded was quite good. So.
And I'm going to submit testimony.
Excellent. Just for the council's benefit and perhaps the public, anyone who's interested, I have an obligation through my employment contract to provide an annual disclosure of any investments or business interests I have within Scarborough. I filed that with the town clerk, and I believe I provided a copy of that to members of council. So that's available for anyone who wishes to look at it. And I'm just going to go slightly off script here. I just want to make you aware, last Friday, we did hold a leadership retreat. It was quite productive. I credit the assistant town manager for really encouraging us to do that, but we convened as a senior staff for most of the day on Friday. And we covered topics of communications. We spent a lot of time understanding the survey and talking about what it meant to the different departments. We reviewed council goals, albeit a bit premature. We've not adopted them yet, but we took some liberties there. Certainly talked about budget process and strategy and timeline. And then ended the day with a discussion, a rich discussion, maybe the start of a discussion on leadership values and kind of organizational culture. So it was a good day to convene the group without the pressures of daily workload. And it's something we've committed to doing on a semi-annual basis at the very least. Two final things. The Gorham Connector project, perhaps you've seen it this week. Monday, there was a press release issued. So there's been a fair amount of coverage. I think as I've reported in the past, I have offered myself to help in the kind of this public phase. And so sure enough, I did a couple of on-camera interviews, and I'll be, I expect a pretty active participant over the course of the spring as they hold public meetings and different stakeholder meetings. So please be part of that. And lastly, just a reminder, the second half tax bills do go out next week. Typically, the second half taxes are due March 15th. That it's a Friday and town hall's closed. So it's actually March 18th this year. So I just want anyone to be surprised. You'll see a tax bill
by the end of next week, I expect. And with that, we do have our finance director, Norm Kildell, that is going to provide the quarterly financial update, if you would be so kind.
Good evening. You have in your packet the executive summary. Just the overarching message to you all is we're 50% through the year, and we're pretty much on target with revenues and expenditures. Really don't want to go through the executive summary unless you have questions in detail. We have our normal occurrences at this point of the year. Our taxes are 80 to 90% collected, and our one-time items such as our county taxes are ahead of that 50%, but those catch up as the calendar rolls. A couple of areas to point out is my own department in finance. We've had a couple of folks out with long-term illnesses, so that's giving me some budget savings that I'd rather not have, but financially those are out there. So, and then on the revenue side, we had our bond issue last October, and we're far ahead of what we budgeted on our bond proceeds. So those are the big items in the numbers for this being our second quarter of the fiscal year. So with that, I'd take questions if there are any. Mr. Hamel.
Thanks, Norman. On your summary page, I was struck by the fact that it did seem, although we had some positive indicators, this is on the first page of your summary, it did seem all of a sudden that we are beginning to see a number of negative indicators having to do with what suggests a slowdown in building, fewer building permits, fewer electrical permits. And at the same time, some increases in other areas, in terms of other costs. So I'm wondering, is this perhaps an indicator that we're going to be seeing a slowdown this year, which is actually going to be a year which we could have, other costs that we're looking at, we're going to be renegotiating our employment agreements, labor contracts with our unionized employees. So is it possible that we're beginning to see, in spite of what you hear nationally, that we have a wonderful economy that keeps expanding, that we're looking at a slowdown in development and the related, costs or absence of revenue related to that?
In the big picture, those revenues are not significant to the town overall. Obviously, the vast majority of our revenues come from the property tax line and our state subsidies. But I think I would defer to our planner to tell us whether or not there's a slowdown in building permits.
We have actually seen that, and just working on the budget for this year, I've looked at projections that I submitted last year, and then we got really excited and we upped them a bit for electrical and building permits. And we are definitely trending down. The building permit level in residential and commercial is definitely slowed down. Of course, we're in the winter period right now too, so we have 12 items on planning board for a couple of weeks, so we're picking back up. So it's very cyclical here with the climate. So I think we're not going to come to a screeching halt, but we're definitely a little more steady. I think with site plan review and approvals, I can also project out what we're going to see for building permits a little farther out. So.
Thank you. Thanks. Question.
I would say just anecdotally, I think the biggest change is the Downs project. They are in a different phase, and they're, I don't think anyone should be surprised or expected by that, but they're really focusing on infrastructure right now as opposed to building units. And I think it bears out right here.
One question, does the budget tie to the growth ordinance? In other words, when you put it together and look at the total permits available through the growth ordinance, you sort of plan and assume that those will all be used up? Is that, how do you address that?
That's a great question. Actually, this year, I'm trying to spend more time with understanding how that directly correlates. So yes, we have a certain amount of growth permits. I think it's 261 is our average per year. You know, if we were to max out building permits, I haven't been seeing that. But in this budget cycle, I am trying to roll that into our projections a little better.
Gotcha. And I had one small question for Norm. When we're budgeting, we say we're at the 50% mark because we're at 6 months. Do you budget 1/12, 1/12, 1/12, or do you sort of look at the ebb and flow of revenue and expenses and try to match them that way?
Both. It depends on the revenue line. Certain revenues come in evenly and then others, like our taxes come in lumps. So we do both.
Gotcha. Thank you. I just have two other questions, if I may. Norman, just kind of looking through the rest of the summer here, and again, this is great to have these numbers and to have this discussion, on a quarterly basis. So thank you for that. And, a lot more granularity than we've had in the past, and having the opportunity for some discussion, some back and forth is very helpful. Thank you. I'm looking at, it's not that I look for trouble. I'd like to think of myself as an optimist, but other people could argue with that. On page 2, interest on delinquent taxes. So is that, does that mean anything? Does that mean that we're like, are the percentages collected or lower? Does that mean anything, or am I just reading into something?
It could be. I am not overly concerned personally, given how small the dollar amount at under 20,000.
Okay.
We are seeing just a very, very slight delinquency in payments, but it's our collection rate has been so good that I'm not overly concerned with that number yet.
Thank you. One final question. On page 3, looking at other town revenues, there's, a couple of red numbers there on other town fund revenues and other school fund revenues. Could you help us get an idea of what that means, if anything?
That just means that we didn't put a budget in there for those revenues. And so mathematically, you've got revenues and the formula makes it look as if it's a negative, but since it's on the revenue side, you have revenue without an estimate. So that's a positive indicator. It's just,
okay.
It's a math anomaly.
That's all I have. Thanks, man. No question.
Yeah, can you describe a little bit more, Norm, the encumbrances that you had in the executive summary for IT and public works, what those were, and does that mean we should anticipate less expense and
those
the second half?
encumbrances are our annual contracts. So on the public works side, that's our contracts for materials like salt, sand. So the encumbrance locks in the budget so that the appropriations are reserved, and it's a tool to help you not overspend your budget line. And then on the IT side, it's those annual maintenance contracts. So you're locking in the monthly or quarterly or semi-annual payments on those maintenance contracts, so that same thing, it's a budget tool. So as you make those payments, that expense moves from encumbrance to actual, and your math still works out the same.
Okay.
Thank you, Norm. Tom, all set?
I'm set, and I'm certainly available for questions on any of my report if there are any.
Council Cushing.
I'll be brief. I did attend the 3-hour meeting on the traffic calming policy. And I wanted to say to Tom that I was extremely impressed with the patience and the listening from our chief of police, our town engineer, our fire chief, and our public works chief. And it struck me that those are sort of the highest levels of the town. And then, of course, Councilor McGee and Councilor Anderson and I were in the cheap seats listening. But I really felt like what I saw was a real effort to try to understand what people were saying and to hear their concerns And my impression is that there is still an ongoing effort to incorporate those things into the traffic policy. And so that's a good job from me. That's,
Appreciate that feedback. Yeah, you had the A team there. And I would have been there, although I probably would have been a hindrance. But I was here doing a reevaluation meeting with the Higgins Beach residents. So pleased you had that experience, and their efforts are genuine, and I think they're well intended. I know they're well intended. But I also know it's taking much longer than people would like. So we appreciate that. We want to get this in front of you as quickly as we can at this point.
I wanted to address that point as well. I know that the town staff has worked hard to respond and has committed to several meetings and, really going deep on this to make sure that they have a good solution. That notwithstanding, I think the level of frustration that I'm seeing and hearing and actually sharing in terms of feeling is that this is a problem. Okay, we have identified this as a serious risk to safety. And I understand the practicality of this. We're not going to be paving and putting in permanent speed bumps, traffic calming measures in the winter. I mean, I get that. But in view of all of those things, I think I remain very uncomfortable and very concerned about potential liability here. I sent a note to the town manager about this, copied the chair. And I think that we need to, do whatever we can to move forward as quickly as we can. And I understand there are structural process issues and issues of state oversight and so forth. But at some level, when you have a group of people that have been at this for so long, you have a change in the leadership group. And I just think, I spoke with the new head of that group, Rory Benjamin, who's, at home sick in bed. I hear what you're saying and I feel their pain. I really do. So I just say we should do whatever we can to try to get over the hump on this.
Thank you, Council Hammond. Any other questions for the town manager? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to our next item this evening. Item number 9 is non-action items. We do have an update available to us on the CDBG grant and on homelessness. So,
Excuse me.
Good evening, Lauren Dembski Martin, Social Services Navigator for Scarborough Police Department. And I just wanted to, excuse me, thank you all for letting me come tonight just to update you on the Community Development Block Grant that Karen Martin and myself had secured. So this, you can go to the first slide, Liam, thank you. This came to light in like 2022 when I was dealing with an influx of an unhoused population here in Scarborough. And this was kind of at the height of ERA, a little bit post-COVID, but we were still kind of dealing with some of those effects of kind of post-pandemic. We were utilizing motels as shelters, but I was seeing an influx of dealing with folks in motels, folks in encampment, folks living out of vehicles. So Karen and I partnered to try to secure one of the community development block grants through Cumberland County. And we were super excited and successful in doing that. So we were able to secure $15,000 through the block grant with kind of 2 things in mind. So it was a kind of two-step process. The first thing we wanted to do was do a grassroots assessment of what was going on here in Scarborough. I knew that I had come in contact with about 60 individuals in 2022. We really wanted to figure out now what was happening in June of 2023. So we wanted to do that grassroots, again, on the ground assessing. And then we wanted to take the data that we collected through that, and we wanted to hire somebody to consult with and to kind of analyze that data and really help us come up with some successful next steps. So that was our thought with this grant. So in July of 2023, we contracted with Milestone's Home Team. Not sure if anyone's aware of what that is, but the Home Team serves the Portland area. At the time, it goes out to the unhoused population, helps them to kind of supply some basic needs, just have conversations with them, link them to supports in terms of continuity of care, They're able to provide a nurse who can actually go out to some encampments and do some kind of basic healthcare, because a lot of folks unhoused do not want to access the healthcare system. So we thought they would be a great service to contract with to help us do this grassroots assessing. So again, we contracted with them in July, and so for July, August, September, and October, they helped us again have those conversations and collect some of the data with the unhoused population here in Scarborough. So between July and October, between myself and the home team, we were able to complete 13 assessments with unhoused individuals here in Scarborough. And that is some of what I want to share this evening. If we look at kind of what the picture was in August, we know that there was roughly 3 to 5 individuals living off the Gorham Road area. There was about 8 to 10 individuals living off the Payne Road corridor, which is kind of, you know, Walmart down to where Costco is now, kind of that road corridor. 1 to 2 individuals unhoused in the Dunstan area, and then 2 to 3 individuals that would kind of rotate through, kind of coming in for eligibility with GA, falling off radar for a little bit, becoming unhoused, coming back to GA and being moteled maybe for a month or 2, and then falling back into the unhoused population. So again, that was August, which already looked a lot different than the 60 individuals in 2022. But if we look at the current picture, I think we're seeing more of a success. So we have about 6 individuals currently on the Payne Road corridor, 2 to 3 individuals that rotate through our general assistance, kind of currently in those same situations of being moteled through general assistance, back at it. And then about 1 to 2 families a month or so that are kind of the new Mainers that come in unhoused and then have become eligible for general assistance, and we're able to hook them up with services. So we're really excited about what we're seeing in the data that was collected. And what we know is that when we compare the data between August and currently, about 3 to 4 of those individuals were actually sheltered at the new shelter in, it's the Portland shelter, but it's in Westbrook, which always seems a little strange. But, and we know that we were able to hook up one of the folks who was staying in the Dunstan area with like a long-term motel rental based on like an SSDI that this individual received, which was really exciting to get him in a long-term rental for the colder months. We know that a couple of individuals relocated to another town because it was closer to service providers, and that made more sense for them. And then we have been able to really, through the social services division at the PD, wrap services around 2 to 3 individuals and find them permanent, secure housing, which is the most exciting piece of it, right? Is when we can actually see somebody sustain. So go to the next slide. Thank you. So we learned that the majority of the unhoused population in Scarborough are in encampments. And I think some of those folks, you know, we see.
What have we learned?
Is this very high for you, Laura?
Yeah, we're still learning, Tom. We're So, sorry. Do you want me to back up at all on that? Do we have any questions on the previous slide?
I thought there was another slide.
No. So most of the individuals are in encampments. Some of them are living in their vehicles, but again, this is a very minimal number compared to what I saw in 2022. And then we have those few that are staying in motels, becoming unhoused, staying in motels, becoming unhoused. So that's just a pie graph to kind of highlight that piece of it. Through the assessments that we collected, we also wanted to kind of find out what the critical needs of unhoused population are. So that's what this graph shows. The number one obviously was housing vouchers. So we are helping folks all the time secure the Section 8 vouchers, the BRAP vouchers, which is like the bridging the gap. Some of the other new programs that have come to be. But what we also know about obviously those vouchers and housing authorities is that the wait lists are months, years long. So that is not a long-term solution. Yes, we get them on the list, and yes, that's great, but oftentimes that is not going to be a answer to somebody who is unhoused in the imminent time period. Second on that list, which I found pretty interesting and have been really kind of brainstorming about, is the access to showers. Is that a lot of these folks that are unhoused really care a lot about their hygiene, I'm giving them, you know, baby wipes or figuring out ways that they can hook up with a church to possibly take a shower. But they're really needing and wanting some access to shower. The Learning Collaborative in Portland is one place where unhoused population can take a shower. And so oftentimes it's navigating bus routes to the Learning Collaborative, which can be really hard for some of these individuals. We're lucky enough to have a pretty good rapport, like with the Metro bus system in terms of donated passes or some grant funding to get passes. But it's a hard ask to ask them to go from Scarborough to Portland just to take a shower. And then you can just, I won't go through all of these, but you can see kind of dental care, case management. Of course, IDs, SSI cards, things like that are a critical need for the unhoused population, because for them to secure housing, for them to potentially get case management or some of the other services, they need that ID. And how do they get $10, right, to get an ID or a new social security card? So we're always brainstorming with folks, how do we get those basic necessities to really, again, help them sustain and get that continuity and care for the long run. We're gonna keep learning. Okay, so we know that there is a substantial decrease in the parking lots that were utilized. In 2022, I would oftentimes ride through like the Lowe's parking lot, Marshall's, Walmart, and I would have 20 vehicles at a time where I knew people were living out of their vehicle and trying to come up with a plan for them. We are not seeing that currently. We probably have 4 to 5 individuals that I know about in Scarborough that are utilizing some different parking lots to park their vehicles for shelter. So that's a plus, is that we know that that has definitely been a decrease. We also know that 12 of those 13 assessments, they indicated that they were willing to be sheltered. But I think what's really important to know is what the perception of housing or shelter is to somebody. So when somebody says they're willing to be sheltered, that does not mean I'm willing to go to the Westbrook shelter. That often means I want my own space. I want my own motel room. I want my own apartment. And some of that kind of from what's listed on there, right? They have their own trauma history of being in close quarters with folks. They're petrified of bed bug outbreaks. They have a service animal that's not allowed. They're not able to stay, you know, with a partner that's really important to them. Or they've been turned away from a shelter in the past and they're afraid to try to access that again. So although some folks are certainly open to the shelter, when we see that on paper, like, yes, that, you know, 98% of the folks are willing to do shelter, that is not what we might perceive as accessing a homeless shelter. And then I think what is just this kind of last little bit of information, and I've gotten several calls from community members around why won't they access the shelter? Well, right now they can't access the shelter. So due to the sweeps that are happening in the city of Portland, the shelter in Westbrook is only open to individuals that are identifying as living in an encampment in Portland. So that is certainly a challenge right now. What we're finding, and I just did some calls around a family that I'm working with, is the asylum shelter in the Portland area is only for individuals. It's full. The family shelter in Portland is full. The Westbrook shelter, you can't access. The Tedford shelter in Brunswick is full. So when we get these calls about, well, why won't they access a shelter? There's really no shelter for them to access right now. So it's really trying to piece together other possible brainstorms of where they can go or stay. So that's kind of the basis of what we've learned so far. And our next steps, Karen and I, is that we will be working with somebody to come to one of our stakeholder groups, present kind of this information more, and come up with maybe some next steps in terms of what we want to do and how we want to go forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions from the council? Yeah, that's kind of right.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for all the hard work that you and the other navigators do. I'm really proud of the town of Scarborough that we are able to do this sort of work through the police department. And for those who don't know in the community, we were probably one of the first communities in Maine to do this. So I appreciate everything you're doing. Thanks.
Thank
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. You were there at the beginning. I know a lot of this started with grants when Robbie Moulton was here, and, you know, you've been an innovator and I think an example for, you know, other towns in the area. So thank you for that. Great analysis. It's nice to see progress. you don't really get a feeling of progress, I think. So, but seeing the facts and figures, very helpful. I think it's great that the local press picked up on this. There was good coverage of it as well. A couple of questions. One is there a seasonal aspect of this though, where the numbers are going down? Because in the winter, the residential motels that are full of vacationers in the summer, bring folks in. So could you
Yeah.
speak to that?
I think, so absolutely. I think that we definitely see a decrease, right, during winter months, is that folks want to be sheltered. There's some weekly rentals, there's some monthly rentals that are not available during spring and summer months. With that said, even when I compare my data to like 2022 of these same months here in, 2023, or even the beginning now of 2024, we're seeing a much lower decrease in numbers, which is still really promising. But yes, we certainly, in warmer months, we're going to see a slight increase probably of the unhoused population, or we're going to see an increase of some panhandling, right, Payne Road corridor. But I don't think trending in the increase. I think we're trending in the decrease.
Great.
That makes sense.
The final question is, I know it was before they went after the tent, community in Portland and filled all the shelters up, but it touches on the issue of, how do you decide how and where and when to offer shelter versus housing? And could you speak to that issue for a moment? Because it did seem to me that everyone's tried to provide housing contingent on commitment where possible, where people will make some sort of, they'll get into a program or they'll make some sort of commitment to have a different pattern of behavior so that they're able to be rewarded with housing. Could you speak to that issue for a minute?
Sure. So I think, and tell me if I'm not answering your question as I talk to this, but I think what we try to do in terms of, what are we presenting to the individual is, so there's an individual circumstance, right? So some folks are able to function in the shelter, get linked up with case management in the shelter, get hooked up with programs that then put them into a housing program. Some folks are already in some of those voucher programs and they're more ready to sustain their own independent housing. The new Mainers, a lot of those programs are willing to help fund if they have an apartment that's like ready to go or they're about to be evicted. So you got to almost play off sometimes what somebody has in place and what they're secured like in the moment in terms of what options you can give them. And everyone's presenting very differently. There's also there's a couple of individuals here in Scarborough that are never probably going to be sheltered. They're not able, that's not their lifestyle. That's not the way that they're able to function in life. And so that's not even an option to them to offer either the shelter or a possible apartment, even though they make the income to do that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much.
I just want to express to our gratitude for all that you've done and the staff, just trying to understand the issue better. How do you help better? And even just collecting this data so we can absorb it, so we can react better as well. It's wonderful. So excellent work.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Next item on tonight's agenda is order number 24006. It's a public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendment to Chapter 311, the Town of Scarborough Schedule of Fees relating to lift assist. This is a second reading. We did have the chief in last one, and basically this is, if I'm not stealing anyone's thunder here, this is to assist. The fire department is getting calls to help move people who need an assist at privately run facilities, and we are proposing a fee. This fee has been discussed with a lot of those owners of those businesses. I don't have a whole lot else to say other than they're just trying to cover their costs.
Yeah, I just want to be very clear. This fee is directly associated with licensed or staffed medical institutions or facilities. So a resident that needs this service, by all means, it does not apply. By all means, call for service. This is really intended to speak to those assisted living or medical type institutions.
Thank you. That is a very important clarification. Yes. All right. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
A motion is second. Any discussion? Okay, call the vote. All in favor? Sure, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Next item is order number 24014. It's public hearing and action on new liquor license from from 58 Culinary LLC located at 15 Pleasant Hill Road.
This is just a catering company who's looking to expand, for alcohol, because this is new alcohol licensing. It has to go through town council first for approval.
Thank you. We have an opportunity for public comment. If anyone would like to speak on this, please approach the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
A motion and a second discussion? All in favor? Show that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Order number 24015, it's a public hearing and action on a new food handler's license from Jenna Leong, DBA Measuring Up Kitchen LLC, located at 25 Plaza Drive, Unit 8.
This is a new owner of this establishment, which requires a whole new food handler license.
Thank you. Opportunity for public comment on this item. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
A motion and a second discussion. All in favor? Show that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Old business, order number 24007, second reading to repeal and replace the ordinance establishing a moratorium on adult use marijuana cultivation facilities and medical marijuana cultivation facilities in the Pine Point Industrial Overlay District that the town council approved on August 16th, 2023, and enact a new ordinance establishing a moratorium on adult use cannabis cultivation facilities and medical cannabis cultivation facilities that would apply townwide. We have an introduction on this one. This is the second reading, I think. Yeah.
Do you want me to do it?
Liam or?
Or-
Councilor Catamount?
Go ahead, Liam.
So as explained in the order, this is repealing the existing moratorium, which is limited to cultivation licenses within the Pine Point overlay. It expands that prohibition to all cultivation licenses or expansion of existing townwide through June 30th of 2024. That's the intention.
Appreciate that. We do have opportunity for public comment on this topic. If you'd like to speak, please approach the podium. Keep it to 3 minutes. Be respectful. It's a race. Go Miss McKee.
Mina McKee, 309 Black Point Road, number 59. First, I'll be quick, but first, a thank you to the Town Ordinance Committee for addressing this issue so quickly. It's wonderful that you're doing this. And I also was pleased to read the lawyer, Philip Saussiere's memorandum, because I think it's quite clear. And I also think that the Maine state law really will be helpful in redoing the ordinance. But at the last meeting, I asked if anyone knew where the Marinero, whatever,
Cannabis.
whatever was coming from, the pot was coming from, and was it legal wherever it was coming from? Well, it just happened. Soon after that, the Portland Press Herald had an article about Whitefield and that 6,000 plants were found illegally grown by some Chinese growers. And then a friend of mine emailed me, Channel 8 had a news item, which if I can take 1 minute, if I can take 1 minute, wait a minute, to just quote some of it. It was about illegal Chinese-owned marijuana farms under investigation in Maine. And in Turner, Maine, it turns out the discovery of an illegal marijuana grow operation at a farmhouse and in Turner, and there could be 270 in Maine, the officials said. And and then it went on to say, investigators also discovered 2,500 marijuana plants and an elaborate illegal growing operation, according to authorities. Somerset, Lincoln, Androscoggin counties, county officials have been dealing with illegal grow houses in recent times, with a half dozen people charged in just the last few weeks. And Maine authorities and now Senator Susan Collins and Angus King and Representative Shelley Pingram and Jared Goldman are calling for a crackdown for the U.S. Department of Justice, by the U.S. Department of Justice. They believe these illegal growing operations are connected to Chinese-owned marijuana farms cropping up across the country and here in Maine. So, but with that, which is quite alarming, I just thought I'd add a little piece to the pie. I just wonder if any of the cannabis, the 16 cannabis people we've given license to, I don't know, some of them are manufacturers and some are not, but I'm just wondering if the manufacturer is receiving illegal pot, does that mean that that manufacturer is in collusion with an illegal process? And if so, should there be fines and should the operations be shut down? It's sort of a question. So in light of that, I wish you luck in regulating the cannabis in our town, and I really thank you for doing so. But in my mind, less is best. So
Thank you, Ms. McKee.
Thank you
Those are
very
good
much.
questions. Welcome, Mr. Rapido.
Good evening. Dave Rapido, 10 Bickford. It's good to see you. Missed you. Speaking on behalf of the residents of Bickford and Holly Street, we fully support the order as written and taking the time going forward to help in any way to kind of get some solutions to the odor problem and kind of restore our quality of life, if you will. So I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, hello, my name is Brandon Albert. I'm I recently moved back into the area, taking over a cannabis space. And I'm here today asking for an amendment or an exception to the rule of new business. And I'm about to tell you why. And this is assuming the moratorium gets continued, so I'm asking for that before that happens. There was a previous tenant in the space that I took over, and I found out that they'd failed to pay rent for many months. CMP had shut down the power, so the space was abandoned and it became available. And there are, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the spaces, but there's 2 caregivers in every space, so they have to have 2 different businesses. I happen to know one of them, because 10 years ago, I was one of the first people in this building. And this guy's still there. So the way the rule is written, you can't change the business license more than 50% in a year. So that's what we did. I became 50% owner of this guy's business. And this was a business that I found out they hadn't renewed with the state for years, so the business was administratively dissolved. They hadn't renewed with the town for at least 2 years. They hadn't paid for their caregiver licenses, so really I came in and cleaned everything up. I paid all their back state fees. I paid 2 years worth of the town licensing fees to get them up to date. I put my own caregiver license down, which gave the space the right to have plants in there once again. So we'll call this guy the good guy, but the bad guy in this, who I'd never met before, apparently he's trying to hold the space hostage. He's claiming that he has the rights to the space that he doesn't own. He's not the owner. He's just the previous tenant. And because the license was formally, he was involved in this unit. His girlfriend happens to be a lawyer, so they're trying to bully me with some legal jargon. And what's happening right now is attempted extortion. They're trying to get $35,000 out of me for the rights to the space in a business that I want no part of. I don't want his equipment. I paid thousands just to have all that abandoned equipment removed. So really, it just amounts to I'm just now being harassed and attempted extortion in this space. So what I'm asking for is this amendment or exception would grant me the license in my own name, my own business. And that way it just removes any ammunition that he thinks that he has. He will lose, but this could still lead to me having to pay thousands more for a lawyer to fight this guy in court over something that is quite silly. Like, he hasn't renewed anything in years, but he could still try to, I could still have to fight this guy. So anyways, I strongly believe it's in the best interest of the building owner, of the town, and of the state to grant me this exception and let me take over this space so I can right the ship and keep that going forward.
Thank you for your comments. Liam, do we have any online? Seeing no further comments, I'm going to close public comment and turn this over to the council. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Go into discussion. Council Catarina.
Yeah, as Chair of Ordinance, I wanted to let folks know that, the upcoming ordinance meeting on Valentine's Day, no less, we will be, discussing, where we may be moving, because if we put this moratorium in place, obviously we want to have something in place by the time that ends. So I just want to give people the heads up, and the meeting will start at 6 o'clock. And I'm really sorry if you have Valentine's Day reservations, but you should come see us, and forget that, do that on the weekend. That's it.
Councilor, questions or comments? Discussion? No? Okay, I'll just quickly address the public speaker that I appreciate the hardship that you're experiencing right now. What's before us, though, I feel is a greater community concern, and we've been dealing with this for, anyone want to put a number on it? 2 years? I mean, 2 years, if not longer. And I apologize that you're having some trouble on your end, and I hope you don't take this personally, but I do feel like this is probably the right move at the right time for this council and this community. So that would be my response at this stage. No other comments? We'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Show 7-0. Thank you. Item number 24016, first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading on the new request for a cannabis establishment license from Tucker Noise DBA KTK Noise LLC located at 148B Pleasant Hill Road for adult cannabis products manufacturing. Tom, or Liam, sorry.
So the proposed license here is for a manufacturing license. Just for some additional details on this specific one, this is effectively a products packaging operation. They're not actually even making anything there. They're simply taking their product and putting it in packaging and labeling it. But the state determined that they needed a manufacturing license through OCP for that. And so therefore they need a license for through the town for a manufacturing operation.
Thank you. Public discussion on this, public comments. If you have anything you'd like to speak on this topic, please approach the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comments. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
A motion and a second discussion? Yes, Council Souther.
We have talked about just the abundance of motions related to cannabis that appear on our agenda and how it gives the community the perception that we just keep approving and approving. And, you know, we've gone through some steps to clarify that a lot of these businesses require multiple licenses. And when we do first and second reading, it comes before us twice. And all of those things have been highlighted by me in the past. But I do want to point out, just for the public's benefit, that something like this, we were very specific at ordinance that the moratorium was to address the odor issues that we're seeing. And by and large, the odor issues are the result of cultivation facilities. And so for right now, because this can grow into such an enormous conversation very quickly, the moratorium covers cultivation, whereas, you know, we're still allowing some of these manufacturing facilities to take out new licenses. That does not mean that the direction of ordinance has been set and that we're going to limit ourselves to that scope, but just initially, that's kind of where we're at in terms of not taking off more than we can chew.
Excellent clarification. Thank you. All right. No other councilor comments on this? I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Show that as 6-1. Thank you. Order number 24017, first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading to consider a zoning change request for a portion of R050002 being an approximately 2.15 acre parcel located on 42 Two Rod Road, currently zoned rural farming to residential R2. And request, Autumn, would you like to kick this off?
Yes, this is a request from the applicant, and she is here this evening, but I'll just tee it up for you guys. This is a request for a zoning change that came into our office. The current property holds an older home and a secondary home with 2 driveways. It's a little bit over 2 acres on 42 Two Rod Road, and it's zoned rural farming. So they purchased the property and wanted to potentially split the property and to be able to construct a new single-family home where the existing shed is and access that existing driveway. And so to do that, they have to do this zoning change. This is on the limit of the rural family and the R2 zoning district. So this is actually the border property. We've spent some time with the applicant, and they have the adequate frontage and depth, and all, they can meet the requirements for the ordinance under the R2 if approved. They did go through the planning board at their January meeting. Staff recommended approval based on the comprehensive plan designation and the adjacent property sizes. There are some that are a bit the same, 2 acres, and there are quite a few that are more in the 1 acre realm in this area. And the planning board also recommended approval of the request. I can answer any questions, and then the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Autumn. Okay, questions for Autumn on this? Do you want to take public comment, or do you want to wait until?
Wanna do the first Public comment first?
I'm thinking public comment. Let's do public comment first. If anyone wanted to speak on this, please approach the podium.
Hi there, my name's Katie Treem. I live at 37 Old Neck Road. I'm the applicant, or one of the applicants. We purchased this property in December. There are currently 2 structures on the property. They have 2 driveways. One of the property, actually the one we're looking to divide from, that structure is we have to take that structure down. It's no longer inhabitable. So it's going to be need to be taken down. But the current structure, the house with the 2-car garage, we are just kind of restoring that. So that's going to stay in its current kind of state. Oh, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Nothing online, Liam? All right, with that, I'll close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We'll go into discussion. Counselor Hamel.
Thank you. I read this and it seems eminently reasonable, the request. However, I remember former Counselor Ken Johnson used to accuse this process as being in effect spot zoning, I think was the phrase he used to use. So can you help me with this? Because I'm in favor, I think, of the applicant, but I'm a little confused about the test that we apply.
Sure. So spot zoning is definitely a term that would be used if you, per se, you were in a neighborhood of TVC and you wanted to be B2. And so that would be a spot zone. This one in particular is adjacent to the zoning district they are now and adjacent to the proposed. So this is a great example of really an appropriate place to rezone property if the council wishes. It could sort of go either way to that effect, so.
The other thing I'll just ask again is that, I know the planning board and the long-range planners and folks that deal in your realm tend to be very kind of cut and dried on things. So when I see like, with a comprehensive plan, check, I get that. But then, it's reasonable. So what's the reasonableness test here?
I think that the reasonable test for this is that I took a look at the adjacent properties to the north of it, and they're all about 1 acre. And so, south of it is 2 acres. There's a few that are a little over 1 acre. So the reasonable test is really my professional assessment of it. The comp plan gives us the guidance to base it. And when we rewrote the zoning ordinance last year, we had specific requirements. So the planning director, the staff report is based on comp plan, and then the planning board looks at land use. And so that's how we come to that.
Thank you.
Councilor Shu.
To follow up on that, with spot, do you say spot zoning or whatever?
I'm wondering if we're doing this one, if the neighbors are gonna be coming to us next, and then the next neighbors and that. And it reminds me of like Highland where one person came and we ended up converting the whole neighborhood. And I didn't know if that's.
I don't think that you'll see that in this instance. I will say that some of the R2 properties that are north of this already could potentially add an additional home on it with the requirements that LD 2003 put into place. So I don't think that you'll have that issue come up. Now, there is a parcel, it's a large, very nice newer home just across the corner. They have the most land, and there are two.
Yep.
So they could definitely subdivide that without coming to this body. So I don't think in this instance, there will be a run on rezoning.
Okay.
but-
And then I just had a clarification question, because I'm curious as to if this is a resident coming forward. The applicant and the information that you provided says Joseph Christopher and Catherine Treem, but then when I go to Vision Appraisal, it says that the land is owned still by Geraldine Clow. And then when I go to GIS, it says that the property is owned by JK Development LLC. So part of my decision to making is this an individual resident coming to us,
No,
looking
the-
to move? And so I'm wondering who the actual owner is. Is it JK?
So the
LLC?
applicants, there's two members that own it. I believe that the estate information is probably just not up to date because I think they did close at the end of December. And so I can let the applicant speak to that.
Yeah, because again, GIS is showing JK Development LLC. That is not the owner.
That's her.
That's her.
Okay,
And so
so
she's
I,
the
and I think
individual.
I'm going back to my zoning board days where you have the applicant as individuals, but it's actually an LLC that owns it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess, and that's the way she filled out the application, but I have proof in our office. that
Yep,
she
I was
did.
just
So,
kind of
yeah.
curious if this
But
was
I
a
know it
developer
says-
coming in looking to split, develop, make money, move out, or if this was individuals coming in
Sure.
to settle and wanting to.
Yeah, I don't think her intention is to live in the home. I don't want to speak for you, but I think the intention is to rehab the existing home, sell that, and then sell the adjacent home too, if approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Shoup. Any other questions from the council?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? All right, show that 6-1 passes. Thank you. Order number 24018, act on the annual seasonal road posting for weight restrictions if necessary from February 15th, 2024 to May 15th, 2024.
This is the annual rite of passage. It is this time of year.
Spring is coming?
We really haven't had the traditional typical winter weather, but there is still certainly frost in certain roadways. So this just allows the Public Works Director to post these roads. And we do work very carefully with contractors and homeowners who may need to exceed the weight limits. And it's certainly all weather dependent and temperature dependent. So we look for your approval.
Any public comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion, a second discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilor Katarina.
And this is to the manager, please, if you can answer it. So we're gonna post them now, February 15th. I'm making a prediction. I should never do this because you know what's gonna happen, but can this be lifted before May 15th if we continue to have such a mild winter and whatever? The reason I ask that is because I know that this can be, when you have seasonal road postings, it can be a hindrance, like in construction or whatever, so.
Yeah, this authorization, the timeframe from February through mid-May is typical.
Yep.
And it simply gives the authorization during that period. The authorization would lapse after the 15th of May. It is quite likely, given the experience so far this year, that we won't have to post it all. But this
Oh,
really
okay.
just provides the authority should it be needed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other counselor questions or comments? No? All in favor? Opposed? Show that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Order number 24019, act on the request to move approval on names posted to the various committees and boards by the Appointments and Negotiations Committee at the January 17th, 2024 Town Council meeting. Ms. Shoup?
Sure. So at the last meeting, I did the first reading. Do I need to read all of these again?
No, I think they're
No?
posted and
Okay.
you did it.
So we posted them and we're
first reading.
asking for council to approve them this evening.
Okay. Opportunity for public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I got a motion and a second discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, Councilor Catarina.
I just want to thank people who volunteer to be on these boards and committees.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it is. And yes, Councilor Hamilton.
And I'd like to thank the committee. I know this is your busy season, so I know what that's like. So nice work. Thank you for your good efforts.
Yeah, again, thank you to the committee and the people that are stepping forward to volunteer their time. So we do appreciate it. All in favor? Opposed? Sure that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Order number 24020, act on the request to accept the 2024 town council goals. So I'll give a little background. About a week and a half ago, we all met on a Saturday morning for morning into the afternoon, a little bit past lunchtime perhaps, to discuss our council goals for the year. And one, I'll just say it was a pleasure. This is quite a diverse group, an intelligent group, and some of the discussions were excellent. We had, I think we all acknowledged that we had a lot of goals from 2023 that were continuation in progress along the way. So a nod and acknowledgement that we want to continue that work, plus adding in some of our own 2024 council goal touch. So I do appreciate everyone giving up a Saturday, a good portion of a Saturday, including staff that had to witness the sausage making. I do know that there were a couple of residents in attendance, and they really found out the hard way that we don't make decisions before we get here, that they happen on the fly. So in any case, any public comment on this item? Mr. Pritchard.
Jim Pritchard, Maple Ave. One of the goals I've looked at that I have concern about, and that's a tax increase of no more than 5%. Based upon the history of this council, during budget season, you go 3%. We've had 3.5%, 4%, 4.5%. So are we looking at a 5.5%, 6%? I think your goal should be lower than 5%. It should be down around 2 to 3% and go from there. I did not see anything in your goals about addressing traffic. We have a traffic problem in this town, and it doesn't appear to be being addressed. I was here for part of the workshop. They're having it now on Sawyer Road. Same thing, trucks, speed. When are we going to address this? And it all comes down to growth. The more people you bring into this town, the more traffic, and we don't have any idea how to get them moving safely or whatever. And will we, as the public, get updates of where you are with these goals? We should know where you are and when they're coming up. And during those discussions, is it going to be open to the public? Are we going to be allowed to comment? Or are we going to be handed something and say, here you go, you got to live with it? We have to address the growth and traffic at the same time. Somebody's going to get killed. We keep messing around with bringing more people in this town and no way to get them moving. And I don't see the cut through to Gorham is going to help any. Might want to look at a cut through to the spur to get the people off the residential streets. I talked to somebody in the area of Cumberland. They're starting to see an increase in traffic. It's all over. But nobody listens. Nobody is listening. And that was one of the big things that came out of the council corner. Listen to what people are saying. I have to say that was one of the best meetings I've ever been to in this town. It reminded me of my old union days, where I had a bunch of people together on issues. I think that was a great job. But those are my concerns about your goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. Just in between comments, I will address one of the concerns, Mr. Pritchard. The goal you were citing for budget increase less than 5%. It's not a 5% increase, and I do want to clarify that that's a net budget increase because we really can't peg it to a mill rate because we're doing a reevaluation. So overall, we may sit here and know in the back of our head we want to maintain the 2 to 3% range that we've been working within for a few years, but we actually can't put that as the target goal because your mill rate may jump up or down based on your reevaluation numbers. And we don't have that info yet. So we just said as an overall spend on the budget side, we'd like to keep it on less than 5%, just to help clarify that.
Yeah, you all know me. Nina McKee, 309 Black Point Road, number 59. I don't know what your goals are specifically, but I just want to tell you, go for it. Go for it and good luck because you all work very, very hard. And I can't believe the number of committees that each one of you is on. And you do. And I love these meetings. I love the way the council deliberates. And there's, there are people that don't agree, but everything is civil. And it's really wonderful. And we are very lucky to have each one of you. Now, on top of that, I want to say, I think I've said before, I am so grateful when I drive down Route 1 and that traffic light, those traffic lights are fabulous. They're fast, they're like go ripping down the road. So I want to thank you all, and I do wish you good luck with the goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion to accept our council goals?
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second discussion. Councilor Hamel.
I wanted to point out one thing. We talk about goals, but there was also a section on norms, it's at the end. And I think this is equally important. It's not only what you're going to do, but how are we going to deliberate, how are we going to do it? And I want you to know, I took one to heart. I only had one phone call tonight. I know it wasn't written for me.
Baby steps.
Very much appreciated.
Very much appreciated. Any other councilor comments or thoughts on this? And I'll just further jump in real quick and say that it's no surprise that growth is a topic in this community. Community survey says it. I know the first time I ran and lost, I kept saying it as loud as I could. I mean, it's been an issue in this community for a long time. There's no silver bullet, and I think that's what you learn when you're here. There's no silver bullet. Parts of the comprehensive plan will tell you that if you want to deal with traffic impacts, you actually make more interconnectivity with streets. The irony is now you're going to dump more traffic onto residential neighborhoods, and we're seeing a pushback from that. So how do you, and without putting in a complete public transportation system, I'm not sure how we get around this without diverting more traffic through neighborhoods, which is what I don't think anyone wants. So if anyone out there has an idea or a goal on how to solve for these things, we are all ears. We are willing to we sit in the same traffic you do every day. So, and I think this council shares the same concerns about growth and our desire to see it slow down here in Scarborough itself. So, Councilor Catamina.
Yeah, just a little addition there. I noted on a longtime residence, I won't give the name, but Facebook page, posted a newspaper clipping from 1971 on all the people who showed up to complain about all the growth in Scarborough. So I did comment on that saying, yeah, some things never change, but Anyway, just.
I did see
so you know.
that and it blew my mind. This room was packed, or.
Oh, it
must
was, yeah, and I know exact.
The old town hall. but-
I remember what they were complaining about too, I think. I was in high school at the time and it was, anyway.
It's amazing.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Doesn't change.
Okay. No other comments? I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Show that is unanimous, and thank you all again for the hard work that went into that. We have item number 10, standing and special committee reports and liaison reports. Counselor Anderson.
Yep, we have a finance committee meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and we're already starting to work on the goals that were listed. So we are going to be reviewing some analysis to update a cost to serve model that Karen Martin's been working on with others in town staff. We'll also spend time better digging into the reevaluation and understanding the budget impacts and what that could mean for as we make budget choices this year. If we have time, which I doubt we will, if I'm trying to get through those two big items, we're starting our process to review our financial policy. So we're gonna kind of chip away at that throughout the year just to kind of review, refresh, revise, and see if there's recommendations. And we may get an update on impact fees in terms of the plan there. So going back to the statement you recently made about growth, part of the need is to update our impact fees so that we can invest in capital without having to increase the tax rate. So getting those refreshed will be an important thing for us to do this year. So pretty heavy agenda. But hope everybody shows up. And again, if you have an interest in the cost to serve in particular, we're open to feedback and we'll hopefully allow more feedback from the public in terms of how we make sure that model is, stands the test of time.
Thank you, Counselor Anderson. Counselor Katarina.
Yeah, I'll just remind, I already mentioned it, but the ordinance committee meeting will be Valentine's Day, the 14th at 6 PM. And what's on it is traffic ordinance updates, Piper plumbing ordinance, some things from planning regarding landscaping and screening standards, TVC height request, that's building height, not people height. And then cannabis establishments. So, please come. Also, the legislature's in full gear right now, so I have more meetings. I'm on Zoom all day, unless I want to drive to Augusta, but I'd rather be on Zoom. I'm sorry. Sorry, Maine Municipal. But anyway, Tom mentioned that supplemental budget is huge because the whole for just Scarborough alone is what, $181,000 if they don't pay us, pay up. So I talked to Tom and Nick, and I hope you guys are okay with that. I'm gonna write some testimony as a member of Maine Municipal, just saying, cough up the money, please, do what you said you were gonna do. And I will keep you guys, in the loop if anything else comes up that really negatively impacts Scarborough or positively. So, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Counselor Katarina. Any other updates or Counselor Sather?
Yep. Communications also meets on Valentine's Day at 4 PM. We are going to establish authors for March Counselor Corner articles. I know Counselor Hamel had expressed interest, so I would like to touch base with you, Counselor Hamel, before the meeting, just to get a sense of what you would like to write about, so I can report to the committee. And then we're also going to be talking about the council goals and how to incorporate them as our committee work carries on for the year. And then separately, the newly formed building committee, as Tom alluded to during the manager's report, the application deadline to be on that committee is February 9th. It's a simple online form. It's linked on our webpage as well as the school department's webpage. And there is no criteria for being on the committee other than interest and the willingness to commit to coming to the meeting and being on one subcommittee. So all interested parties.
And being a Scarborough resident.
And being a Scarborough resident, thank you. Yes, so all interested Scarborough residents are encouraged to fill out the application. And the first meeting has been set for Monday, February 12th at the Public Safety Building at 6 PM. Our intent is to have it be a hybrid meeting. For those who watch our meetings know that the Public Safety Building isn't the best venue to have a hybrid meeting because we are limited to using the owl there, but we will do our best. And I really am kind of trying to encourage in-person participation. I think that's going to give us the best experience. So if you are able to join us, that would be great.
Thank you, Counselor Sather. Yes, Counselor Hamel.
The Shellfish Commission and also Coastal Waters will meet next Tuesday for their February meetings. And I did want to make an announcement about a new community association that was formally activated a week or so ago. The People of Pine Point, Inc. Appointed a board and elected officers. The board is made up of 9 directors. And they are as follows. The chairman is Heidi Davis. And the directors are Patricia Deegan, Sue Bailey Clow, Joshua Koreski, Maura Tui Erickson, Robin Provencher, Elaine Richard Silkman, and Jeff Thurlow. And then the officers who were elected were President Mark Dresser, Vice President Sumner Lipman, Secretary Rosemary Hawks Harris, Assistant and Recording Secretary Dory Hoy, and I'll provide you with information on this for the notes. And then finally, our clerk and registered agent is Mark Fournette of a Lewiston law firm. So I think this is significant in a number of ways. One is that we have an experience with community associations in the town of Scarborough, well-established ones in Higgins Beach and also at least a couple at Prouts Neck. And I think they played a very important role in terms of, trying to help us get our arms around the damage from the recent storm. So I think that this new group is intended to do the same thing. And there was discussion, and I know that we'll be having more conversation. This group will be having more conversations with Tom and town staff. But I think there's an opportunity for us to work together to try to organize some sort of meeting or symposium, as a community to invite a wide range of elected representatives to try to get a handle on this. It's pretty clear that the efforts are all over the place, some local, some much broader than that. But, you can see what can be accomplished by a group of people, a small group of people really focused on this when we spent the time talking with our neighbors in Cape Elizabeth. So this group looks forward to doing that. I don't have any official role with them. I've been assisting, in their getting organized, but I think it has great potential. The final thing I will say is that they're targeting something like early to mid-May for this meeting, this symposium, and the other point is that there is an intent for them to conduct a membership drive, likely in a March timeframe, to build membership and to get committees formed and work on bylaws and that sort of thing. So that's kind of big news. They've been working on it for a while. And believe me, sausage making at its finest. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Caterina?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I totally forgot to mention, don't forget the fuel rally, Project Grace, which is this Saturday at the Scarborough Public Library from 10 a.m. to noon. The Project Grace is near and dear to my heart. I've supported it through my business for a long, long time. But this fuel rally, it's fun. It's actually fun. You can come and there's all sorts of really good, so bring your money, because I don't think they'll take Venmo, but bring cash. There's really good baked goods and different things to buy. They were doing a pre-order on chowder and chili. I believe they sent us one with the council, because I got 2 as being involved with them. So if you didn't order some, take them up on it. It's really good. But my God, it's amazing how many people we are able to help in this community with their heating needs. And I just can't say enough good things about it. And I used to bring clink bags to council meetings and hand them out. I should start doing that again. But clink bags are available in the clerk's office. And take them home, fill them up. That's all Jeff and I use are the clink bags for the fuel assistance. So, feel free to do that too. So thank you.
One
That's it.
caution, you want to make sure and check the tags that are on those bags. You might want to put your own tag on there. So.
Your own tag. They're fuel rally, they're fuel assistance
Just
tags.
kidding. That was a joke.
Wise guy.
Councilor Shu.
Sure. So as you know, we have the Ad hoc Community Center Committee and they're moving forward. They have their next meeting this coming Monday. I think it'll be really interesting. I think it's actually in council chambers at 7. And they're going to be doing a presentation on the different models and they're going to be discussing the operational costs and revenue analysis. So I just like to remind folks that, you know, a community center actually does create revenue. So it's a big upfront cost, but we're going to be really diving into the numbers and kind of really seeing how sustainable a community center could be and how much revenue they can bring in as to the costs and operational costs like that. So I think that'll be a good meeting on Monday. And then on Valentine's Day at 5 PM, we have appointments and negotiations. We're going to be doing some more appointments, but I also just wanted to point out to further along one of our council goals, one of the things that we're going to be discussing and exploring, which needs to probably get away from appointments, is creating a liaison for the planning board to the Conservation Commission. Because currently, right now, we have liaisons to the Transportation Commission, we have liaisons to range planning and to sustainability. And yet this is one of our goals, is to integrate conservation into the planning process. So this seems like a next step. So this is something I believe will be language change that will eventually come our way, but I just wanted you to know that's something we're working on.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. With that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn if somebody.
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second discussion. All in favor? Sure, that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.